All right, while developed nations have made bold climate finance pledges, the gap between promises and actual delivery continues to grow. For developing and climate vulnerable countries, accessing climate finance has become full of red tape and conditionalities. Add to this the sobering reality that global funding is shrinking. Helping us to unpack this further is SABC News specialist researcher Janet Whitton. Janet, a very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for your time. Of course, we heard that package that you did shortly. Let's now talk about the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals. They're quite clear on climate change, but that 2030 deadline is fast approaching. Help us unpack what it actually says.
The Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs that you mentioned, actually were signed and sealed and agreed to at COP21 in Paris in 2015. But they go back much further than that, to the 90s, when the United Nations put together the Framework Convention on Climate Control and then agreed to the Kyoto Protocol, which was the agreement to limit greenhouse gas emissions. Of the SDGs, there are 17 in all, but the one that mentions climate control, as you can see here, is Goal 13, and it specifically talks about climate change. But the important thing is it links to everything. The SDG goals essentially are designed to end poverty. That's the big picture goal that they're looking at. And climate change links into all of the other ones. Ending poverty is goal number one. There are others that talk about health. There are others that talk about water and energy. Clean water is essential to health. Clean water is essential to agriculture. Agriculture is essential to food security. Food security is obviously essential to everybody's livelihood. Energy is a big bad guy in the context of climate change, because so much of the world's greenhouse gas emissions comes from producing energy. The oceans and ecosystems are affected by pollution and are affected by the quality of the air, the quality of the water. So everything links together, and climate change is actually at the center of a lot of it. And interestingly, you mentioned all of these goals. I know, of course, this conversation is happening at a time where the Environment and Climate Sustainability Working Group is currently taking place at the Kruger National Park. I would imagine that some of these goals are hot topics right now, particularly from a South African context, energy. But speak to us about what we are likely to expect at those working groups. It's interesting, as you say, that it's happening at Skukuza in the Kruger Park, because it's obviously the center of South Africa's biodiversity and conservation efforts, but it also is on the edge of the tropical systems that bring so much of the adverse weather to Southern Africa, across Mozambique and into the Kruger Park. The ECSWG has divided itself into 5 priorities. Biodiversity and conservation is an obvious one. It's coming back to Skukuza as well. South Africa has one of the most richly biodiverse regions on the planet. We have an extraordinary amount of both flora and fauna in this country that is very important to conserve. And you know, people often talk about, for example, rhino conservation, which I know that Dion George is intrinsically involved in. You'll be speaking to him about that later. It all fits into the whole biodiversity picture, and all countries have a plan that they've put together to map out how they're going to conserve things, and those are the things that are going to be looked at carefully. Land degradation and desertification, also important to South Africa, but particularly to Central and the Sahel region of the southern part of North Africa. Land degradation is a key aspect of trying to end poverty, food security, all of those things. So that filters into everything. 70% of the land in the world that isn't under ice has been adversely changed by humanity. Wow. So that needs to be dialed back. Chemical and waste management is self-explanatory. As far as chemicals is concerned, there's the key phrase, I think, over the next couple of years, as far as the world is concerned, is circular economy. And that's where the chemicals come in. Waste management speaks for itself. And we'll get on to all of those. Oceans and coasts, again, pollution, the key.
And I mean, importantly, of course, we have all of these goals, all of these projects, but these need funding. I mean, where's the money going to be coming from? Just speak to us about the countries essentially that are going to be left behind?
There are a lot of countries that are going to be left behind because, of course, it's been said so often, but it needs to be said again. The countries that are most vulnerable to climate change are the countries that are least responsible for it. So first world industrialized countries need to take responsibility for the problems that they have actually caused. And as far as financing is concerned, the estimate is that you mentioned 2030 as being a key date. Between 2030 and 2050, which is the net zero target, the estimate is that $10 trillion is needed. At the moment, they're raising 1.3.
Wow.
So we are so far short of raising the amount of money that we need. The Paris Agreement was very important because that was when a lot of the countries, 198 countries, have agreed to the Paris Agreement. Make that 197 now, with the withdrawal of the US. Interestingly, the three countries that have not ratified that are Libya, Yemen, and Iran. And now put the United States into that group. It's an odd grouping. So most countries have agreed to a certain amount of financing, but governments can't finance all of this. There isn't enough money. Development banks are key because of lending, and this is where we talk about poor countries. Poor countries cannot afford to increase their debt. They are already overwhelmed by debt repayment, and that's going to be very important.
These are some of the questions that we are going to be posing to the Minister, because it is important also when we speak about the Just Energy Transition Framework. How is that also going to be funded? What is currently being done? All of these are really important conversations. But very quickly, in terms of the Leaders Summit that's happening in 30 seconds, Janet, what should we be looking out for as South Africans in as far as these goals are concerned?
There are going to be promises made, but of course these promises, there's no legal obligation for any of these countries to agree to them at the G20, and that's part of the problem. But I think that it's a very important ahead of COP30, which takes place in Brazil later this year, and a lot of the agreements that come through will follow through to COP, where agreements are made that do need to be kept, or supposed to be kept.
Well, lots to unpack, but thank you so much, Janet, for breaking that down for us. Of course, that was the SABC's specialist researcher, Janet Whitton. Let's continue to this now. The effects of climate change on food production and ways to mitigate the impact of extreme weather conditions are some of the issues under discussion at the G20 Agriculture National Dialogue in Pretoria. The Agricultural Research Council, in partnership with the Department of Agriculture and the Food, Agriculture and Natural Resources Policy Analysis Network, are hosting the dialogue. It brings together farmers, scientists, researchers, government and academics to formulate these themes towards the Agricultural Working Group engagement and the G20's meeting of agricultural chief scientists.